Om Shanti, good evening. Welcome to this interview with Raj Yogi, our weekly session. And tonight the topic is continuing to be spiritual care in food preparation, so around sustenance. So as usual, we will begin with a reflection. Sitting comfortably, checking that there's no tension in the body. And really becoming aware of this very unique, very intimate, very close relationship between the self, the thinker, the observer, the experiencer, the one who is listening at this moment, the soul, and the body in which I sit, this incredible vehicle of expression. I don't want to reject this relationship, although I don't need the body to exist. I, the soul, am imperishable. I do need the body to express through, just as the seed needs to be planted in the soil in order to express what is latent within it. I need a vehicle of expression through which I can demonstrate all the capacities and qualities within the self. And just as the body is so useful to me, the soul, I, the soul, also value this body. And how to care for this body without losing my awareness, my integrity as a soul, maintaining this relationship even as I care for the body, to not lose myself in the caring for the body, but actually care for the body at a higher level by maintaining integrity of the self. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti, and welcome to those who have joined for part 3 of spiritual care for food preparation. So, one of the reasons why we decided to do a third session, I don't know if it was I who decided or what was the case, but we just spent quite a bit actually backing things up a bit in terms of the foundation. It might seem like it's quite repetitive. We always bring that up, but it is so easy to lose the point. And especially when it comes to food, I think it's so easy to lose the point. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to read my own notes here what we're going to talk about today.
I'm impressed you have notes.
I actually wrote these, I think, the evening of our last session, so I can remember what we wanted to share about. And we also invite those, if you have questions, you're welcome to enter those into the chat box, Instagram as well as YouTube. or if you have topics that you're inspired to for us to cover in the future. So we actually mentioned about nonviolence a couple of times in the last couple of sessions about this particular intention in the study is all about Raj Yoga and the study of being a soul. And this word nonviolence is actually used quite a bit it's actually one of the virtues or qualities that's in the United Nations. It's something that I know Gandhi has used a lot of. So what does that mean, particularly in this study, in terms of food? Because I know we mentioned the last couple of sessions as well. Food, it's sort of become politicized. It's become many, many different things.
Yeah, I think we all have different aspects of nonviolence. And I think it's really the same as, quite frankly, any quality. When we're looking at it from the perspective of what Raj Yoga explores. So we could just as easily be talking about love or compassion or tolerance. Is it's because otherwise it becomes a very external experience of the quality. And so with nonviolence, always coming into this first step of experiencing myself to be a soul, and then seeing what nonviolence would look like. And I think it actually broadens, covers much more territory when I am in soul conscious. And just to give you an example, I saw this beautiful video, although it's not about food. I think when they were interviewed, they were in the kitchen, though, so maybe it's a relationship. But a beautiful video on resilience, and they were interviewing various people how they were maintaining resilience through, of course, these very interesting months we've all gone through. And one was, I believe, a very high executive, perhaps the CEO of a large company. And he was sharing that somewhere during the passage of these last 16, 15 months, at one point, and I think for many, it was an extremely reflective period to maybe come closer to spiritual exploration, which would happen very naturally to the soul. I didn't seek out to do that. And they were sharing that there came a point when, looking just at the profit, the productivity, the outcomes, the word they used was it actually felt violent to him. He didn't say it felt unethical or anything. He said it actually felt violent. So there is a deep connection in spirituality between desires and violence that we explore. It's just, when there is any neediness or striving or manipulation of a subtle or gross form, it begins to feel like a violation of our innate state. And so this starts to flow into food because desires has gotten very, very mixed up with food. Every aspect of the food chain, from the harvesting of food, the desire for profit on through. So it broadens the scope of nonviolence. We used to think, okay, I'm just going to eat vegetarian. But when you start to look at the subtleties of it, only by coming into soul consciousness do I become sensitive to the subtleties. What is a violation of my true nature? What is it to violate, or starting to, if you will, deaden my identity as a soul? So it's a very much broader interpretation of nonviolence.
It's interesting how so much of it can be quite subtle, what that is about. And it did lead to something that I was thinking about during last week's session when we were just talking about some certain suggestions we talked about. Do you find that the intention that drives experimentation affects things? Like, oh, okay, I'm just going to try this because I'm supposed to. Um, you know, for some, there might, I've actually known somebody who lives in the family where they're like, no, you're going to have to do what I have to do. So, I
Mhm.
mean, that's obviously, an extreme case and that's an obvious case, but perhaps maybe sometimes the intentions can be quite subtle in terms of the suggestions in this study. Am I clear about that?
It's ironic. One of the terms we use for food is sustenance. And the intention with which I experiment, in this case, with changes in perhaps dietary or my relationship with food, um, the intention or motive or what's driving me will very much determine whether or not it's sustainable. So if it's out of compulsion or reaction or impression or mimicking or any of these things, if it's not coming, as we say, from the heart, if it's not coming from a very clean, pure place of self respect, I suppose, in this case around sustenance, it will not be sustainable. I will just eventually, I think we start to resent it, or it feels like we're repressing ourselves. So it starts to become violent. So really having to, I prefer souls to, as I say, not dive into the deep end around any change. There's a timing to it, there's a readiness to it, and there's, if you will, a feeling in the heart to it. And to give, in fairness to the self, to give the self time to arrive at that so that it's more sustainable, it's less violent. And it's important because violence has been very connected to the word discipline. And, we're talking about introducing the discipline of introducing spiritual care into this very loaded topic of sustenance. And so healing that relationship, discipline is required around change. So we need to kind of understand a very, have a non-violent understanding of that word, a sustainable understanding of that word. And that comes a lot down to what's driving the discipline.
In this study, we often talk about consciousness is really driving things, or called awareness as well, and how there is a link between my awareness and my attitude and how I see things. And so it's interesting about the aspect of intentions. So there is something that I'm sure that perhaps those who have requested for this whole aspect about spirituality and food, this whole thing about vision. And it's funny that I always find that if you go to places or stores or anything, they have the food that's on display, right? I don't really want to eat any of that because it's like I'm not sure. Maybe someone has laid their eyes on them, or if I'm eating something and someone says, "Oh, that looks so good," like, don't look at my food. I'm not sure what it is, but this whole thing about in Hindi, that word is called drishti, right? But we're talking about the intentions again, and there's vibrations that go into thoughts, into our vision of others too. And so there is something that we practice in the study in terms of giving drishti, so to speak, to food. But I think many have questions about, what am I supposed to be thinking about? What is the whole point of this exercise? What am I staring at food? Why is that person staring at the food?
Yeah, I know we talked last session about this interesting correlation between the more subtle the energy is, the more impact. And of course, the subtlest of all is consciousness or smriti. Very, very subtle, huge, huge impact consciousness. And from consciousness comes vritti and drishti, or attitude and vision. And these are very subtle transmitters of energy, if you will, but huge impact. So, if we were to make it very obvious, we don't really like people handling a lot of our food. If I go to the grocery store and I'm buying things, I don't want to really watch everyone. We sort of say, if you're going to put your hand on the fruit, you're buying that fruit, right? Don't sort of just keep handling it. And that's very obvious to us, and we can feel that. But this idea of vision and the consciousness I am in, transmitting something through that consciousness. So I'm actually handling the food in an invisible way with vibration. And so that, again, we've become, we have and we have not. I have a lot of faith in our capacities. And so I think we're in sometimes kind of aware of that. And so, yes, this idea that really, is there any food that is free and it's, it's all produced and manufactured unless you're yogic farming? I don't know if it's so really kind of, just as we get the fruits and vegetables at the store and we bring them home, and the first thing we want to do before we eat them is wash them. We really don't want to just take it straight off the shelf. And we like to kind of wash it. And that's water does have a cleansing property at some level. So that's great. But then how do I clean the vibration that's also there? And so this idea of the drishti, really, that spiritual drishti means vision, but then ruhani, spiritual vision, this idea of sort of cleaning. There's many things happening when we do this drishti in a soul conscious awareness. I am re-establishing at that second this food, this matter, just as there's two parts to me. There is me, the soul, the being, and the body, the humus made of the elements. These two parts both need to be sustained. The food in front of me on the plate has two parts as well. I, the soul, am invisible to the physical eyes. The body is visible. The food on the plate also has two parts, the invisible and the visible. So we've done a lot of care with the visible, which is great, but the vibration also is there. And what quality is that vibration? Because I, the soul, will consume the vibration and the body will consume the food. So this is the idea of giving drishti as I'm preparing the food, not just for the body, but for the self as well. And it's reinforcing as I'm eating that food. I don't forget myself. You alluded to that in the beginning, that the moment we start eating food, we forget that we're a soul completely and get just
All about the
consumed.
food.
Forgive the pun, but totally consumed. It's amazing how many deep conversations we can have about recipes and, as if we're discussing the Bible or something. I mean, deep conversations. We are consumed, completely engrossed in food. So we'll lose ourselves very quickly. So it's that chance to reinforce that relationship, a chance to, if you will, clean the vibration or inject it with spiritual vibration. And yeah, there's so many aspects happening as we give drishti to the food.
No, I know we might have sort of jumped forward a little bit just
I just
because
want to add, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I feel that a remnant of giving drishti to the food is something that many souls do, which is saying a prayer before they eat food. Because another aspect of that drishti is we actually bring God into the equation as well. I mean, if you're going to put vibrations in that food, you might as well pick the highest one. So this connection to the Supreme Soul, very divine or sublime vibrations. And I think a remnant of that is saying a prayer before you eat the food.
Well, that'll be part of our questions tonight. So I know we sort of jumped forward in terms of like that vision on food, but maybe that's not even just when it's already prepared and ready, but when we're actually at the grocery store. I know, I think you talked about this maybe a couple of sessions ago. It's not the greatest idea to go to the store when you're hungry. But it seems to be more than just about that piece. It's like when you're in a space where there's even a subtle form of desperation or neediness and hunger, not to sound like a judgmental way, but it definitely changes your frame of what is necessary, what is not.
Yeah, I think we always back things up a bit, like, how did I get to a state where I'm so physically hungry? That's really important to check in. But I think as we go into spirituality and develop that self-mastery, there's so many aspects to the objective of Raj Yoga, and one of them is mastery over the physical senses. So there was a period in the original days of the organization called the Beggarly Days when they really didn't have a lot of food. They talked about going and picking berries for breakfast and so there really wasn't a lot of food, and yet I don't get the feeling they were particularly hungry. So again, speaking to the power of what the soul is experiencing can actually affect our relationship even with the physical senses. It doesn't mean, wow, this is a great way to go on a diet, I'll study Raj Yoga. That's not what I'm saying. But it does really help us to, again, um, restore or heal our relationship with the body. It's not about abusing the body or neglecting it, but really healing that relationship with the body, because we are using physical food sometimes in an unhealthy way to try to feed a spiritual need. Sometimes we're using it in a denying way, which is also a spiritual need. That I think that's a really interesting, a whole interesting conversation of how physical sustenance got mixed up with spiritual sustenance.
Mm-hmm.
I'm over consuming because I'm empty, but I can also under consume
Yeah.
because I'm empty if
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeking value. So it's a loaded topic. So it starts to heal that, so that normally the body is sending out very powerful feedback on what it needs. And it's
Like
almost
stop
been,
sitting all the time, your back hurts.
yeah, yeah. So we've become a bit numb to
Mm-hmm.
that because the relationship's out of kilter. So ironically, as I go through the spiritual study and I, the soul, become healthy, it heals my relationship with all the resources I'm entrusted, whether it's relationships, finances, everything. But the closest is with the body. And it really starts to, everything from sustenance to, yes, alignment. It really starts to heal that.
Mm-hmm. So it's a great way to sort of transition to this topic that we touched on a few sessions ago about, and I know that one of the students in Montreal had a cooking
Mm.
session. What kind of consciousness would help me when I'm actually preparing food? Now, again, this is Raja Yoga, right? So, is there sort of like different levels, or is there? We'll talk about the point of that too, but we kind of
Mm-hmm.
talked about that. But I think many are asking, like, what am I supposed to be thinking about?
Yeah. I know some like to take even just a couple of minutes to meditate before they do food preparation. And the idea there is that I want to, even if one isn't studying Raj Yoga or anything, but I just want to be in a peaceful state as I'm preparing food. Again, knowing that there are those two aspects, the physical, and we can put a lot of care into the physical, which is wonderful. But then there's also the vibration or the fragrance, as we say, that I, the soul, will consume. I would like to eat peace.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to eat love. I would like to eat lightness. So I will need to be putting those vibrations into the food as I'm preparing it. I need to be in that state. So that's in a nutshell. I mean, obviously, the highest level we talked about remembering God while I prepare food. So I'm actually putting those yogi vibrations into the food, which are supercharged and very nonviolent. So,
Mm-hmm.
I think minimally, that's what we're experimenting with.
So, in terms of thoughts, and I guess it's a part of, one doesn't have to be, as you're saying, soul conscious to really be being mindful of how they're cooking, but I assume that there would definitely be some impact because
Yeah.
regardless, they are souls. We all are.
I think what I observe for myself and perhaps happens for many, and I think it's in some ways it's the way it sort of has to go. It's kind of the way that if I was to give an example, it happens, we saw with dance. when we're very young or whatever age we are and we start, we really just, quite frankly, start on quite a gross level. Um, just basic mastering of the movement, very gross level of movement literacy. And then as we go along, we refine, we keep refining until it comes to the point where we're really paying attention to quite invisible things in our movement. It just gets more and more refined. So I think when it comes to this relationship of spirituality and food, at the beginning, it probably is going to be gross. We're going to focus a little bit more on content. What can I eat at the content level, and maybe less weight on the vibration. And I think that's so we've noticed that that's the basic formula that tends to happen with all the lifestyle changes, is that we sort of start on a very surface level, if you will. And then it sort of has to go that way, that the more I keep studying spirituality and, yes, mastering soul consciousness and my connection to the Supreme Soul, the more this will be less on the gross level, my lifestyle shifts and it will get more and more subtle until it's quite invisible things I'm looking at. My standards or quality will keep changing as I progress through the study, and I sort of think it has to go that way. It's the case with any art. So it's understandable that we might have a very superficial approach to it. It's easier to get a handle on what exactly are the foods that I'm going to eat here, content wise. And yes, I will be as peaceful as I can, but I won't really become aware of what we call a peaceful or pure diet until I go deeper and deeper into the study.
Now, I know you shared about certain vibrations I want to perhaps maybe experiencing. But how about the level of thoughts? Because that's obviously at the level of feeling, and I feel the soul saying, "Yeah, my mind just wanders. All of a sudden, I'm trying to feel peaceful. Oh, look, I'm thinking about something that now has created some heaviness inside."
Well, yeah, I mean, if I can't do it while I'm seated, I'm not sure how well it's going to go in the kitchen. So again, it kind of needs to progress. But yeah, we have some basic ideas, and I remember once I was at one of the retreat centers, and I really enjoyed this because we sort of are like, be a yogi in the kitchen, be remembering God in the kitchen. And so, anyways, at this retreat, there was, I think it was preparation for the evening meal, which would start in the afternoon. The afternoon is often when we have nap time. But we happened, two of us wandered into the kitchen just before we were going to go for rest. And we noticed something must have happened with the scheduling, because the only one in the kitchen preparing food for quite a few was the chef. There was no team supporting him. And we realized there's no way he's going to be able to do this. It's just not going to happen. So we sort of, we didn't want to, we wanted that, but we said, we felt it was the right thing. So we said, is there anything we can do to help? He said, yeah, no, that would be great. And he got us, cutting vegetables, and we're cutting vegetables. And then out of the blue, he said, what are you thinking about right now? Tell me a point from this morning's class. And I loved it because he was drawing attention. It's not just remembering God, but he was drawing attention to any kind of spiritual knowledge I'm chewing on while I am preparing food is going to take me vibrationally in the right direction. So maybe I'm not, okay, I'm a soul and I'm a supreme soul, but something that really engages me in terms of a spiritual reflection can be quite powerful. So I will find I'm often, when preparing food, when ironing, when driving, etc. So many people ask, how can you meditate while driving? How can you meditate while ironing, preparing food, walking down the street? And when we explain, meditation means to reflect on eternal truths. So we are exposed to eternal truths in our classes. And the idea is I keep chewing on them as I go through the day. And so it becomes really, we're going to think about, trust me, you are thinking about something when you're preparing food. The mind is never empty. So if I'm going to think about something, then why not, a sort of spiritual aspect? So it's something to get used to. We're totally capable of thinking about things as we prepare food. So now, what would I like to think about while I'm preparing that food? Knowing that the vibration of those thoughts is going to go into the food
Mhm.
preparation, into the food I'm preparing.
It's just then at the level of, you know, one could be, well, how do I know that I'm doing it? Like, how do I know that there's vibrations going through? What if this is all just, just all made up in my head?
Yeah, you might as well ask, how do I know I'm a soul? I appreciate there's a level of trust. And one thing I've always enjoyed about the study as it's presented is you just have to experiment and judge for
Mm,
yourself. I can't convince you of it. Yes, I've experienced benefit in my own life, but that's not particularly helpful to you. So, really, it's just experimentation and seeing what happens. We're going to be doing something while preparing food, so we have nothing to lose.
mhm.
So, it's really about, again, if I'm in the study, experiencing enrichment of the self through what I'm studying, I will want to start to have that bleed into or flow over into other aspects of my life. I won't want it
Mhm.
to just be that small period of time in the day when I'm seated.
Yeah.
I'll want it to I want to start living this way.
Do you feel it's a subtle sensitivity, so to speak? I remember when my brother and my sister and I were really, really young, we always had to go visit this individual, and she was always very unhappy. And
Mm.
and not necessarily overtly unhappy, but just just quite rough and abrasive. And we'd have to go there for dinner. And I was 5. I'm like, I don't want to eat what she makes. When you're
Right.
5, you don't understand. But it's interesting that, like, would there be something more subtle that we don't understand? And it's sort of in that relationship of intention and vibration.
Yeah, sorry, I was just um so yeah, I like your sharing because of course when we think of children, we think of very pure and innocent. And that ultimately is the end all be all that we're talking about,
Mhm.
is having that sensitivity awakened again so that you suddenly do become aware of vibration, which is as real. This is ultimately what this whole conversation is about around food or anything, is that we've got two aspects, the visible and the invisible. Do we dismiss the invisible? I don't think that's possible if we look at our lives.
Mhm.
Feelings are not visible, but they're very real. They have they make up what we experience during the day. So we have to kind of resolve our relationship with the invisible,
Yeah.
acknowledge that it is playing a huge part in our lives, and what is the significance of that? But yeah, I think when there's that purity as children have, they're quite sensitive to these things, but of course they can't articulate what's really going
Mhm.
on. They just feel this doesn't feel right,
Yes.
and well, why? I don't know. It just doesn't feel right. So, but that
Mhm.
purity is there. So as we go deeper into spirituality, that inner compass is waking up,
Mhm.
and we start to become more aware of what's always been there.
It feels like you can actually trust your feelings instead of try to avoid things. So
Hmm.
Benny has shared here a comment: to be a yogi in the kitchen reminds of a phrase someone told me a long time ago. The phrase was, abs are made in the kitchen. Have you heard of that term?
I haven't, but
Food
I
is
can
really
see where
deep.
how it came up.
And I realized it through this food series. Well, I'm glad you're taking benefit, Benny. Mhm.
That's very cute.
So there was one final question, was
Mm.
about we were about this aspect of God. It's
Mhm.
um, one of the things that has been mentioned. I'm not sure what session. It's just all blurring together now. You hear just praying to God while you are um, just before you eat. And some religions they do offer the food to God.
Yeah.
Hmm. And what is that like, particular in the study? Hmm.
So again, it connects a bit to what is my understanding as I'm engaging in a behavior. And again, just I think as sensitive as the topic of food is, the topic of God is as equal, if not more sensitive. But what we start to explore is this idea, do we really know God? Because that will affect the different aspects or activities I engage in relationship with that being, including offering food. And this idea of understanding him as the purifier, as the bestower of happiness, um, and this basic formula that whatever I offer to that being will be returned to me, multiplied and purified. So we kind of have this different relationship or understanding of that being as we're engaging in these activities. And so I'm offering food not as a sacrifice or anything we used to offer to God. It was always a sense of loss or sacrifice or, look what I am doing and pleasing God and all sorts of. But you have to sort of stop and think about that. Is this soul so needy that they need to be pleased or they need food? We really do we really know this being? And suddenly realizing, wait a minute, this soul is full and complete and does not need anything. We use the term altruistic quite a bit lately. So whatever I'm doing here, I'm actually going to get the return of it. So really sort of having an understanding that I am offering the feeling I always had, of course, it's to deepen that relationship, but I am giving to this being things that I used to feel I needed to sustain me. So it's not whatever was feeding me. Here we're talking about physical food, but it could be status. It could be all sorts of things that I needed. I felt really fed my value, my sense of self. It filled me. It turns out it didn't. So it's very symbolic of offering these things to this being who actually doesn't need them, but is capable of purifying them and multiplying it and restoring it back to me. So it's a very deep principle in Raj Yoga, and it really symbolizes that principle. It also, of course, just speaks to this very respectful, intimate relationship we develop with the Supreme Soul. So it's not a worshiper offering food to God, but it's really this beautiful, respectful, royal relationship we have with that being that's being demonstrated in these types of activities.
It does feel like soul consciousness really changes what the feelings are about what that really means.
Absolutely. It's understanding myself in a different way is going to shift my relationship with that being, but also understanding that being is very much going to shift how I see myself.
Wow. I think that it's been quite a lot. I've also learned as well with the food series. So thank you, Vinny, for suggesting it. And so I believe we will have to end with a reflection right now. So again, let us know if you have any topics in the future. We really appreciate your comments, your presence, and any suggestions you have.
I know in general, it has been brought up a few times. This is one aspect of our spiritual lifestyle. So, this idea of exploring other aspects of the lifestyle of a Raj Yogi might be something we can look at too. I'm very present in this moment. And also very much focusing inwards or introverting. The body is there, of course. But what I am adding into my understanding or attention is the awareness of the self. Me, the soul, and the body. I, the soul, am sustained my vibrations, qualities. It's what I'm made of. Just as the body is made of elements, water, etc., I am made up of love and peace, all the qualities. So, this is what feeds me. I find experiences of deep peace, pure love, that very soft power, benevolence. These make me full or content. They're actually what I have been seeking, even through physical food. That love, that comfort, that reassurance. If I can experience those directly and use physical food as it was meant to be, to sustain the body, that's healing the relationship with the physical. The body is cared for, and I am also fed or cared for. And when I am in a state of peace, myself radiating those peaceful vibrations I've been so hungry for, the body will benefit from not just the physical food, but those vibrations as well. Every cell, every organ being touched as energy by those vibrations of peace. So now the body receives a double meal of physical food, but also very peaceful energy, fed from the outside and fed from the inside, from me. Spiritual care from the self towards the body. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. It's a big topic in terms of our relationship with the body and it not being a violent one.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pass it back to you. What pop quiz? So what's coming up?
I'm sure there's many things. So it is on our website, but I know that next weekend, July 18th, is World Meditation Hours, 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. on our YouTube platform on this channel. We do have a Raj Yoga course in Hindi, I think beginning, was it happening? It started already. We do have at the end of the month on, is it the 25th? Workshop, 75-minute workshop, 5 to 6:15 p.m. on Zoom platform. And it will be on the beauty within, I believe. So again, we invite you to check our website to get the proper details in terms of drop-in meditations, weekly drop-in sessions, Inner Fitness Continues, what we are offering. So thank you for joining us today. Until next time, Om Shanti.